I don't usually talk about my law job, but I need to say a few things after a really tough week helping our friend Heavy D Sparks get out of jail. Let me be clear, this is not a crime. Nobody is saying he did a crime in this case. This is only a civil case. They're trying to sue him for possibly $114 million. Think about that. 20 trucks and they're talking about $5 million for each truck. There's no good reason for that. We went to trial and got those penalties cut down by over 99%. The doctors won less than 1% of their case. The king of diesel was finally locked up. On a Tuesday morning in October 2025, Dave Sparks, the guy everyone calls Heavy D, got arrested and taken to the Salt Lake City jail. The bigger-than-life star of Diesel Brothers wasn't driving a monster truck. He was sitting in jail. But this wasn't about a new crime. It was the crazy ending to a long fight, a fight that cost him over $840,000 and his freedom. But what if the real bad guy wasn't the law? What if the person who put him on the road to prison was one of his own brothers? Building a kingdom of metal and smoke, before the TV shows, the fame, and the millions of fans, Dave Sparks was just a kid in Utah who loved anything with an engine. His story didn't begin in a fancy office. It started in the dirt, with the sound of a motor. From his very first motorcycle, a 1976 Yamaha YZ80, he was crazy about pushing machines as far as they could go. This wasn't just something he did for fun. It was in his blood. While other kids were playing sports or video games, Dave was learning the language of metal and smoke. In high school, he wasn't studying history or math books. His real learning was in fixing cars, welding, and building things. He was creating the base for his future kingdom, piece by piece with his own hands. He even tried the normal way. When he was 21, he went to college at Weber State University to study mechanics. But it didn't work out. After just one semester, he quit. Why? Because Dave Sparks believed that real learning wasn't found in a classroom. It was found in the real world, getting your hands dirty and learning from doing things yourself. This choice tells you everything you need to know about him. He was a guy who trusted his own feelings more than any school system. He didn't want to follow the rules. He wanted to make his own rules. After leaving college, he didn't look for a regular 9-to-5 job. He started working for his uncle's construction company, driving big machines. Soon, that wasn't enough for him either. He started his own small digging business, building rock walls and waterfalls. He was building his dream from the bottom up, with no easy ways out. And he wasn't doing it by himself. In 2008, he hired his very first worker. It was his best friend, a guy the world would soon know as Diesel Dave Kiley. This was the start of the Brotherhood. Together, they started working to build a new dream, a company called Diesel Sellers. Dave's drive was unstoppable. He had a big idea for something bigger than just a local repair shop. He saw a brand, a way of life, a kingdom built on the power and rebellion of diesel trucks. His whole life was a pattern of saying no to the normal way of doing things. He said no to the school system to build his own business. He trusted himself more than any teacher or textbook. So is it really surprising that years later, when another system, the law system, tried to tell him what to do, he decided to fight back? His rebellion didn't start with a lawsuit. It started the day he decided his own path was the only one worth following. The Brotherhood of Diesel. The Diesel Brothers weren't just a TV show, they were something huge. Their road to fame was a perfect story for today's world. It all started on YouTube. Dave Sparks and his crew, led by his best friend Diesel Dave Kiley, started posting videos of their wild truck builds and crazy tricks. They weren't just building trucks, they were building a brand. Their videos were loud, exciting, and full of personality. They were a group of friends living the dream, and people couldn't get enough of it. Their big break came when they got the attention of a true car legend, Jay Leno. After they showed up on his show, Hollywood came knocking. The Discovery Channel saw what everyone else saw, a group of guys with amazing chemistry and a rebel spirit that was pure TV gold. And just like that, Diesel Brothers was born. The show followed Heavy D and Diesel Dave as they ran their garage, Sparks Motors in Utah. Every week, millions of viewers watched them turn regular diesel trucks into total monsters. But what was the secret to their success? It was the Brotherhood. The show sold the idea of a loyal, close group of friends who worked hard and played harder. They were the ultimate guys, and their friendship felt real. But there was another key part of who they were, something that shaped their brand and would eventually cause their downfall. It was the culture of rolling coal. Rolling coal is when a modified diesel truck shoots out a huge cloud of thick black smoke from its pipe. To their fans, it was a symbol of power and a middle finger to people in charge. It was a visual show of the Diesel brothers' entire brand. We do what we want and we don't care what you think. This rebel image was carefully built. It was the product they were selling. The Brotherhood and the rebellion were two sides of the same coin. They sold friendship and fighting against rules, and business was booming. But was this culture the secret to their success, or was it the seed of their own destruction? As their fame grew, so did the smoke from their trucks, and some people in their own town were starting to pay attention. They were building a kingdom, but they were also making powerful enemies. The very thing that made them famous was about to test their brotherhood like never before. The question was, when things got tough, would their loyalty be as strong as the metal they welded? The lawsuit that tested loyalty. Every great story needs a bad guy. For the Diesel brothers, that bad guy came in the form of a lawsuit. But this wasn't an attack from a competing company or a jealous rival. The enemy came from a place they never expected, their own backyard. In 2016, a group called the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment filed a federal lawsuit against Sparks Motors. These weren't nameless government workers from Washington. They were doctors, local doctors from Utah, who were worried about the air their community was breathing. The doctors said the Diesel brothers were breaking the law. They said the crew was breaking the Clean Air Act by selling trucks with illegal changes. Specifically, they were accused of selling and pushing defeat devices, which are used to turn off a truck's pollution control systems. This is what lets a truck roll coal, shooting clouds of black smoke into the air. The doctors weren't just making claims, they had proof. They had actually bought a truck from Sparks Motors themselves and had it checked. What did they find? The results were shocking. The evidence shown in court proved that the truck they bought was letting out 36 times more pollution than a normal truck with working pollution controls. 36 times. It was also letting out 21 times the amount of dangerous particles in the air. This wasn't just about a little bit of smoke. The lawsuit said this was a serious health danger. For years, the legal battle went on. The Diesel brothers fought back, but in March 2020, the judge made a final choice. He ruled against them. The court found that they were breaking the law and ordered them to pay a huge amount in fines and fees. The total came to more than $850,000. This was a huge hit. The lawsuit had attacked the very heart of their business. The changes, the smoke, the rebellion. It was all now officially illegal and very expensive. This created a huge problem for Heavy D and his crew. Their supporters would later say the lawsuit was a money grab by lawyers or a trick by liberals. But it's hard to call a group of local doctors political scammers. These were respected members of the community whose job is to protect people's health. This turned the fight from a simple story of rebels against the government into something much more complicated. Was Heavy D a blue-collar hero fighting against unfair rules, or was he a polluter who was hurting his neighbors and ignoring the warnings of medical experts? The lawsuit was a test not just of their business, but of their character, and it was a test of their loyalty to each other. With a debt of nearly $1 million hanging over their heads, the Brotherhood was about to face its biggest challenge yet: the ultimate betrayal. This is the moment the Brotherhood broke. Faced with a huge fine, the Diesel brothers had a choice to make. They could stand together, united in their fight against the ruling, or they could save themselves. For Dave Sparks, the choice was clear. He was the leader, the face of the brand. He believed the lawsuit was unfair, and he was not going to back down. He was ready to fight no matter what it cost. But not everyone on his team felt the same way. One of his closest cast members, another man who was a co-defendant in the lawsuit, made a different choice. His name was Catton Hoskins, also known as the Muscle. Catton decided he was not going to go down with the ship. He chose to protect himself and his own money. In a move that broke the image of the unbreakable Diesel Brothers crew, Catton paid his share of the fine. He bought his way out of the legal battle, leaving Heavy D to face the results alone. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a betrayal. The Brotherhood had a price, and for Catton, it was a price he was no longer willing to pay. But what makes this story so dramatic is not just what he did, but how he did it. Catton didn't just quietly pay the fine and walk away. He went on Facebook and made a public announcement. He wanted the world to know what he did and why. In a long post, he admitted everything. He wrote, "I bought myself out of the lawsuit because I know how unfair it is to fight the government and its red tape." He was basically saying the fight was impossible to win, so he gave up. But then he did something incredible. In the very same post where he admitted to leaving the fight, he praised Heavy D for continuing it. He wrote that Heavy D never once let in on this. He never said it was right, never agreed to any of it. Went through years of battling this. Do you see what he did there? He tried to have it both ways. He was trying to look like the smart, sensible one who knew when to quit, while also making Heavy D look like a brave hero. This public statement was a masterpiece of passive aggression. It was a way of saying, I admire my friend's principles, but I'm not foolish enough to pay for them. He was trying to look both loyal and smart at the same time. But what he really did was show the deep crack in their friendship. He made Heavy D's lonely battle public. He showed the world that when things got real, the Brotherhood was just a brand. One brother chose to save himself, while the other was left to fight the government all by himself. This was the ultimate betrayal. It was the moment that set Dave Sparks on a direct path to a jail cell. He was no longer part of a team. He was a king without an army, and his kingdom was about to fall apart. October 2025, Judgment Day. After Caton Hoskins left him, Dave Sparks was on his own. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. For years after the 2020 ruling, he simply refused to pay the huge fine. He didn't just ignore the court's decision, he actively fought against it. This wasn't just quiet resistance anymore, it became a willful and repeated challenge to the power of the legal system. And the court was keeping a close watch on his every move. The judge in the case, U.S. District Judge Robert J. Shelby, saw that Sparks was not just failing to pay. He was taking steps to move his stuff around, making it harder for the court to collect the money he owed. The court had ordered him not to transfer or move any of his property, but evidence showed he was doing it anyway. He transferred vehicles, including a Tesla and a Ram truck, despite being told not to. He was also accused of holding liquidation sales to sell off his property and then failing to put the money from those sales into a required account. On top of all that, he was not giving the financial records the court demanded. To the court, this was a clear pattern of disrespect. Sparks wasn't just a man who couldn't pay his debt. He was a man who was actively trying to get around the law. Judge Shelby called his explanations unconvincing and concluded that he had repeatedly and willfully broken court orders. The judge's patience had finally run out. On October 2, 2025, Judge Shelby issued an official arrest warrant for Dave Sparks. He was now a wanted man. 5 days later, on the morning of October 7, 2025, the law caught up with him. U.S. Marshals arrested Heavy D in Salt Lake City and took him to jail. The man who had built a kingdom on freedom and rebellion was now locked in a cell. But this was a special kind of jail time. He wasn't arrested for a new crime. He was being held in civil contempt of court. This meant there was no standard bail or bond he could pay to get out. There was only one way he could be released. He had to do what the court had been telling him to do for years. He had to pay the full $843,620 and finally do what all of the court's orders said. His jailing was the direct result of the path he chose after his partner left him. Instead of rethinking his fight, he became even more defiant. He thought he was above the law, but on that October morning he learned a hard lesson. The judge made it clear that Heavy D controlled his own fate. The keys to his cell were in his own hands. All he had to do was give up the fight and pay the price. For a man who had built his entire life on never giving in, this was the ultimate defeat. A trail of broken bridges. The feud with Caton Hoskins wasn't a one-time thing. It was part of a bigger pattern. While Dave Sparks was building his public image as a fun-loving blue-collar hero, a different reputation was growing behind the scenes. A look at online comments and stories from others in his industry paints a picture of a man who could be difficult, arrogant, and willing to do anything for views and money. Many people who have interacted with him or watched his career closely have described him as scammy and a sellout. Some feel that he and his whole crew are fake, putting on a show for the cameras while doing shady things to make a quick buck. One person who claimed to be a family friend said that as soon as Dave got older, his motto became, "Do anything for money." This suggests that for him, business and brand always came first, even before friendships or principles. This reputation extends to his professional work as well. Another off-road recovery expert from Moab, Utah, told a story about how an unnamed YouTuber, believed to be Heavy D, came in and tried to take over a delicate recovery job. This expert claimed that Heavy D's crew was known for coming in with their fancy equipment and destroying the land just to create drama and get exciting footage for their videos. It suggests a willingness to be reckless and disrespectful to others in his field, all for the sake of content. Some have even said he is willing to risk his crew's lives for clicks. His legal troubles also go beyond the big environmental lawsuit. At one point, his clothing company, Diesel Power Gear, was sued by the famous Italian fashion brand Diesel for trademark infringement. The court agreed that the names and logos were too similar and were causing confusion. The Diesel brothers were ordered to stop selling the merchandise, but they reportedly ignored the warnings and kept selling it anyway. In the end, a judge found that their infringement was willful and ordered them to pay millions of dollars in damages. All of these stories paint a consistent picture. They show a man with what has been described as a public and somewhat antagonistic online persona. He seems to have a pattern of pushing boundaries, breaking rules, and creating conflict, whether it's with environmental laws, trademark laws, or other professionals in his industry. When you look at this trail of broken bridges, the feud with Caton Hoskins starts to make more sense. It wasn't a random betrayal that came out of nowhere. It was the inevitable result of Heavy D's confrontational business style finally being turned on one of his own. The same attitude that created enemies outside his circle eventually created an enemy within it. After 3 days behind bars, Dave Sparks was released. His lawyer argued in court that the whole thing was just a paperwork dispute, and the judge ordered his immediate release. Heavy D himself came out swinging, claiming in a video that he had been unfairly targeted by a group that wanted to drag his name through the mud. But getting out of jail didn't solve his problems. The nearly $1 million debt still hangs over his head, and the legal battle is far from over. But the deepest damage isn't financial. It's the Brotherhood, the very foundation of his empire that lies in ruins. While Heavy D has broken his silence, the silence from his former brothers, especially Caton Hoskins, speaks much louder. The defiant spirit that built his kingdom of metal and smoke ultimately became the architect of his cage, leaving everyone to wonder if an empire built on rebellion can ever be rebuilt once its foundation of trust has turned to dust.